Hello everyone, I'm Steven Johnson and I'm a developer advocate here at Prefect. Today we're going to start Moneyball Marvin Part 2. If you missed Part 1, make sure you click above to check it out before watching Part 2. In Part 2, we're going to gather the box score of the last Nationals game and save it in the Snowflake. If you remember from Part 1, we gathered all the games except for the last one, so we're going to do this one like it's actually game day. After we grab that data, we're going to use DBT to transform the data and merge it with the rest of the season. And then after it's all merged together, we're going to use Hex to create a front end to start the deployment of the script. And then we're going to use Hex to create a dashboard to show off that season data altogether. So in this video, we're going to use 4 tools. So if you want to follow along with us, feel free to download these tools and follow along with us. So we're going to use Snowflake as a database. You don't have to use Snowflake. This will work in BigQuery, Redshift, whatever you want to use. We're going to obviously use Prefect. We're going to use Python to write the code and some SQL inside of DBT. And then we're going to use Hex as the front end. So of course you could use Power BI, you could use Tableau, whatever you want to use as the front end will work, but Hex works because it works as a front end and as our dashboard. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video to see more projects and use cases with Prefect. We have a bunch of more fun ones that are coming up in the near future, so make sure you subscribe to check those out. Without further ado, let's dive into the code. So jumping into the code here, I'm cheating a little bit, did a little bit of copy and paste before we get started. Some of this stuff is going to be the exact same code as what we had in part 1. So again, if you want to check that out, check it out. I had it in the beginning of the video. We'll have it in the description as well. So if you want to see a little bit more info on what we're doing here, feel free to check that out. So let's roll through this code. So of course we have all of our import statements here, our Snowflake stuff, our basic Python packages here, so on and so forth. This next section is our blocks. This is how we store our passwords inside of Prefect. So again, I had all these passwords already saved inside of Prefect beforehand. We're just going to grab those. This is how you do it inside of Prefect. Be looking out for a video pretty soon about how to use blocks inside of Prefect. I'll go more in depth on how to set those things up inside of your code and inside of Prefect. So anyways, going on down our page here. So our first task is processing the batting stats here of the game. And of course, this is again copied and pasted directly from the last script that we had. So again, just going through here, grabbing all this information that we want. So because it's really important that this matches. It matches the data we grabbed from the rest of the season so that we can merge those things together. So that works there. We're going to turn those records. Same thing for pitching. Same kind of idea there. So continuing down, and then we have our processing the single games box score. So then this is what's actually kind of putting these things together, saving them as a CSV file, and then pushing them out for us so that we can upload them to Snowflake. With that in mind, the next script here uploads a CSV into the Snowflake, takes in a bunch of arguments here that we will fill out here in just a few minutes. But essentially that's what this task is doing as well. So again, if you want to hear more about how this is set up, go back to part 1. Just to save some time here, I'm going to skip past those. All right, so now we're going to work on DBT. So we're going to start off by setting up some logging. So we're going to do logging basic config, and then level is equal to logging.info. Okay. So that works there. We're going to do logger is equal to logging.getLogger. Perfect. Again, we need some logs here to make this work. So that's perfect there. So we're going to set up a class. So DBT cloud job status. So these are the statuses that DBT sent us back for a job. And so if we have queued, so again, these come directly from DBT's documentation. So queued equals 1, starting equals 2, running equals 3, success is equal to 10, error is equal to 20, canceled is equal to 30. So that's what DBT is going to send back to us about the job status, which is good. So we're going to do an @class method. We're going to define get status name. Status code interval to a string. Perfect. So we're going to try to return status code there. .name. And if we can't, we need an except block. Do a value error. Perfect there. We're going to return F unknown. And we'll put the status code in there. So an unknown status code if we get back one we don't know. That's perfect there. So continuing down, we're going to create another class. So class dbt. Well, that does not need to be all capitalized. Cloud job status, perfect. So class dbt run error, and we'll do an exception. And we'll do define. We'll do a self status. So again, just some setup here. String message string run details and a dictionary. So again, just some setup here to get our DBT statuses. So we'll do self dot status is equal to the status. We will do self dot message is equal to the message, and self dot run details is equal to, you probably guessed it, the run details. So perfect there. Super dot f string dbt run failed with status. So our status in there and our message. So again, we're just trying to make sure we have good visibility and good monitoring for our DBT runs here. So we're just making sure we try to cover up all of our bases here on our DBT runs. All right, we got our DBT Cloud Client class that we're going to work with now. So class DBT Cloud Client. Define another init. Self. API token. String. Account ID. String. And then raise on error. The Boolean equal true. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to have our self, so our base URL is equal to, so this is just the base of their API, which has cloud.getdbt.com, which has API, which has version 2. So again, we're getting a lot of this stuff from the DBT documentation, just kind of copying and pasting some stuff here. So self.headers, do not need a space there, that would have been sad. Self.headers is equal to authorization. We need some quotation marks. So authorization, if, and then we have our token and API token. Perfect there. And then comma, we need our content type. So this is kind of working with API here. So content type, I'm going to send it a application JSON. Okay, perfect there. So we'll do self.account ID is equal to account ID, and then self.raise on error is equal to raise on error. Perfect there. All right, so that's our classes there. So we're going to create a task inside this class as well. So we're going to have a task that is going to trigger the DBT job. So at task, so we're going to define trigger job. And for that, we're going to need the self, job ID, equal to int, calls, string is equal to API trigger. And that is into a dictionary. Okay, so perfect there. Okay. So continuing on down, so we're going to define our URL that we're going to trigger the job. So it's going to be our, do an f string. So we're going to have our self dot the base ID, the base URL that we built earlier, backslash accounts, backslash self dot account ID. This is how they build out their APIs. Backslash jobs, and then job ID, and then \run. Backslash there, perfect. So we're going to have our payload is equal to the calls to calls. So that works there. So we'll do logger.info, so we can log some things here. So we'll get a little f string that's going to say triggering job with the job ID, so know that it's being kicked off. So we'll have our response is equal to the request.post. We're going to send that URL. Headers is equal to self.headers. And then, of course, we're going to send the JSON is equal to the payload. So perfect there. And then response is equal to, or response dot raise for status. Okay, that's good there. We'll do run data is equal to response dot JSON. Run ID is equal to run data. Data. Oops, there we go. And ID. And then logger.info. We're going to say that the job has been started successfully. So job triggered successfully. And then the run ID is the run ID. Okay, so whenever you're orchestrating a DBT job, you kind of have two things you get to worry about here. So you got to kick the job off, and then you want to make sure that you finish. You want to figure out when it's done. So this is going to kick that job off, and now we got to go back and actually get the job status. So getting out of there, we're going to do another @ task, and we're going to define the get run status. Okay, and this is the most important part, I would say, of orchestrating a DBT job is that you can kick it off with almost anything, but we want to make sure we know whenever it's finished so we can go downstream and do other things as well. So we're going to run status. We're going to do self run ID int and then dictionary. Perfect there. So again, we're going to define our URL. It's equal to f to our self dot base URL, starting off with that base URL that we started out before. We're going to go to our accounts, do our self. This is going to look very familiar. Self dot account ID runs and run ID. So that's our URL that we built out again. So that works. So we're going to do response is equal to request.get. We're going to have URL, comma, headers, equal to self.headers. So that's perfect there. And then response dot raise for status. And then we're going to return the response dot JSON. Okay, so that works there. So that's gonna go get that status for us, which is what we need. So now we're gonna do another @ task. There we go. We're going to define get run artifacts. So again, we're just kind of building out this full DBT orchestration process here, which again can be a little bit tedious, but this is going to work for any DBT job that we want in the future, which I think is great. The dictionary there. So again, we're going to build out the same URL that we built out. So I'm just going to come up here and be lazy and do a little copy and paste job. Perfect there. And then we're going to basically copy and paste the same ideas here, because essentially we're going back and trying to grab what's happening in this run with this task. So that works there. So get run artifacts. Perfect. Okay, so that works there. So now we need to define another task. When we're in this task, we want to format the run details. So we're going to make sure we format these that make them look like we want them to. So self, run data to a dictionary, and also dictionary there. Perfect. So that works. So our data, we're going to do data is equal to run data. Grab the data out of that. So that's perfect there. Status code is equal to data.get status. Get the element there. Perfect. And then with details, this is where we're going to grab a bunch of DBT information here so that we can print it out just for our monitoring and observing. So just so you don't have to fall asleep too much, we're going to copy and paste that a little bit there. Okay, so perfect. That's copy and pasted in there. So again, we're just getting our run ID, status code, status, started at, finished at, duration, environment ID, DBT version, job ID, so on and so forth there. So we're just grabbing all that run information that we want from DBT to make sure we're getting the proper monitoring so that, so that we get a status code we don't want. Let's do something about that. Let's make sure our DBT version is where we want it to be. So just get all that run information that we want. So that works there. And then if details, so if there's an error, I'm gonna make sure we have that as well. So is error. So if the details has an if error, we're going to do a try and except block here. So we're going to do artifacts is equal to self.get run artifact. So perfect there. And details, I'm going to grab the run ID if that fails. So perfect there. And then details, error logs. So make sure we get these error logs, artifacts. Hopefully we don't have any errors, but we all know how that goes, right? Got to make sure we take care of this in case it does error. So data, perfect there, .get. I'm going to grab the logs. And then just in case, we'll say no logs available. There we go, perfect. And then of course for our accept block, we got to make sure if that does not catch them, we can do an accept block and do details, fill in our details and our error logs to say failed to fetch the error logs. Okay, so just in case that they don't exist, we got to make sure we do that. So then we want to return, we like to return the details there. Okay, so that works. And then we want to calculate how long this thing ran. So we're going to do at task, do define, calculate duration. Comma finished at, string. Really testing my typing skills today. I'm not passing, but they're there. So float there, perfect. So if not started at or not finished at, we're gonna return none. Because obviously we can't calculate something if it's not started or finished at. So return none if that's the case. And then if that's not the case, we're gonna do a try and we'll do start is equal to datetime dot from is our ISO format. We'll do started at dot replace. So this is just taking care of how DBT's API returns this. So return or replace the Z plus. Perfect there. So that's going to clean that up for us. And then end is going to be exactly the same thing. So we're going to do a little bit of a copy and paste job there. Replace start with end. We will do, instead of started at, we will do finished at. We're placing the same thing there. So that's perfect. And then we are going to return. How about some math here? Are we ready? So we're going to return end minus start. How about that? Not total seconds. So perfect there. And then accept, just in case something bad happens. Value error or and type error. We will return none. So that's perfect there. And then We also have to make sure we take care of the case that our DBT job isn't finished, right? So this is what's going to calculate the finish, but what if it's not done yet? So we're going to do a definition. We're going to define a function that is going to wait for job completion. If I can spell, there we go. Wait for job completion, self, run ID, int. We're going to do our polling interval. It's int equals 30. And then we'll do a timeout is equal to, or is optional. Over there. So that polling interval is how often it's going to check. So, you know, that can be up for your discretion. If you wanted to check every 15 seconds, change it to 15. If you want to change every minute, you can do that as well. So that's up to your discretion. I always thought 30 is just a nice middle ground there. But of course, that's completely up to you, whatever you want to do there. So with the definition here, we're going to do start time is equal to time.time. And then we do completed statuses is equal to, is where we're going to go get that class that we had before. So DBT cloud job status dot success dot value, comma. We're going to do a few more of those, because the ones that we want to do is success. We'd like to do error, and then we would also like to do canceled. Perfect. So that's our three. That's, if we get those three statuses back, that means the job is done running. If we get back the other ones, that means the job is still running. So that's good to note. So while true, we're going to try get a status response is equal to self dot get run status with the run ID. So we're going to grab that run status. Run details is equal to self dot format run details. So just like what we had before, with a status response there, and status code is equal to status response. Look at the data, and then the status is going to get us that status response, our status code there. Okay, so logger.info, we can say that the current status is run details status and the status code. Perfect there. Okay. So if the status code is in the completed statuses, so if the status code is success, error, or canceled, we would like to, and then if it's not a success, yeah, we're going to copy and paste again, save us some typing. So if it's not a success value, we're going to get that error message. So error message is equal to run details dot get error message, comma, no error message available in case there is. In case that is the case, DBT's API is usually pretty good about telling you what failed, though. We'll do logger.error, and then we'll toss in an F string job. Job failed with status, run details, status, and error message. Perfect there. Okay, so then we'll do another if block in there. So if self raise on error, we're going to raise a DBT on all caps. So we're going to do a DBT run error, and we're going to have run details status, and there we're going to do the error message and the run details So that works there, and we'll go back, and then we will return the run details. All right, cool. So if a timeout happens, and that time, minus the start time is greater than the timeout. So if you want a timeout to happen in there, so if you know that your DBT job should never run more than 15 minutes, you might want to put a timeout in there for like 30 or 45 minutes just to make sure that this, something doesn't happen here to just let this thing run forever. So we're going to raise a timeout error and say that the job did not complete within the timeout seconds. Perfect there. So we'll do logger.info with an F string of job still running, waiting that polling interval that we set up seconds before the next check. So perfect there. Throw some dots in there just for funsies. And then we'll do time.sleep, and we'll sleep that polling interval there. Perfect. All right. So that works. So that's that try block. So let's back out to an exception. So accept a DBT run error. So if this thing fails, we will raise that error. If we get just an exception, we will log that. So logger.error. String is error, checking run status. Toss in our E there, and then we will raise that as well. So it gets out of that block. All right. That is a whole lot. That is a whole lot of DBT stuff there. But that is what we need to get DBT to be orchestrated. So we're good to go there. So now we're going to back out, and we're going to actually create our flow that's going to take in all these tasks together and make them run. At this point, we just need to actually define our flow. So this thing is going to run inside of Prefect. So we're going to do an at flow. We're going to do our log prints equals true, just so we can actually get the logs we print out for us there. So then we're going to define new game data and DBT run. And you could potentially separate these if you wanted to and call them separately, but that's how I like to do it there. So send the webhook game ID in there, which we will define later whenever we send this as a webhook inside of Hex. So that's good there. So we'll do data is equal to JSON.loads, and do webhook game ID there, and webhook given game ID is equal to data game ID. So it's going to grab that game ID out, which is what we need to grab the box for the game. So we're going to do batting file, comma, pitching file, comma, pitching file, batting data frame, and pitching data frame is going to be equal to process single game box score, and then we're going to send in that webhook given game ID to what we defined earlier. That's going to grab all those stats for us and save it as the pitching and batting file there in the data frames. And we can do some prints here if we want to. So print, so that we'll do a new line, and we'll do files created with a little semicolon, and then we'll print out the F string, the batting stats, throw in the batting file, and then we will do the same thing except with the pitching. So it's the batting, we'll do pitching stats, and then change batting to pitching there. Perfect. Okay, so now we need to print our summary statistics just to show that we're actually getting something here. So we're going to print an F string, the new line of total batting records, and then do the length of the batting data frame. So that's just going to show us that not only was a file created, but there's actually something in the file, which is important. So we'll do the same thing for pitching as well. Just so, again, we just want to make sure that we get some visibility here, so we don't have to like wait until it gets in the Snowflake or wait until our DBT file runs, or worst case scenarios, we wait until the dashboard is made and see nothing's there. So that's good there. So now we're going to do so now we're going to do our Snowflake upload. So we're going to do config is equal to open up a dictionary. So we'll do our CSV path. So this is the actual path of the game. So we defined that earlier so we're doing the batting stats first, so batting, and then we do the game ID, so 744798 for the specific game, .csv, so that works there. Throw a comma, so that what we want to call this in Snowflake, so table name, we'll call this batting last game, and then database, throw some single quotes around there. So database, so my database is MLB project. Again, that's going to be different for you unless you create a database with the same name as mine. We're going to do our schema, and that's going to be our season data. Again, all caps for Snowflake too. Snowflake's likes for you to yell at. I don't know. We'll do account. I'm sure there's an actual reason for why that's the case, but I don't know it, so I'm just going to say like us to yell at it. So Snowflake account, that works there. My user, that is S Johnson, all caps. Password is going to be SF password, and again, those were the blocks that we did at the very beginning of the code, at the very top up here. So those are what we loaded in with our block passwords there. So that works perfectly there. And then last but not least, we need our warehouse. And that's going to be our compute warehouse. Again, that warehouse is going to be different for what you have inside of your Snowflake instance, but that's what ours is called. And then we're going to do our success rows, comma, num chunks is equal to upload CSV to Snowflake. So our config. Perfect. That's going to send all that. It's going to send that CSV as a table as batting last game into Snowflake inside the database and schema. So that works there. So that's the batting stats. So we need to do the same thing for pitching. The good thing for us here is that a lot of this is going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to be a little bit lazy and copy and paste, change batting to pitching. Again, batting to pitching. Everything else is going to stay the same there. This is going to stay the same as well. So that works. So then once those two things are uploaded, we need to now actually run the DBT project to do our transformations that we're going to write in just a moment. So we'll do API token is equal to DBT API. So again, another one of those secrets we loaded in at the beginning. We'll have our account ID equal to, and our job ID. So this is the job that I've already defined for us there. So 7878141. Perfect there. So we'll do our client is equal to DBT. So this is what we built out earlier. We're going to send in that API token, our account ID, and we'll do raise on error is equal to true. So we want to know that. And then we'll do a try block to trigger our job. So run response is equal to client dot trigger job. So we're using that client to trigger our job here. And then we want to put in our specific job ID, and then cause equals. So you can put whatever you want to. We're just going to do testing job trigger. So you could say, running a new game or whatever you want to put in there. Potentially put an F string in there and actually say, running for game ID, this one, which would be nice as well. Run ID is equal to run response data and ID. Perfect there. Okay, so our final status is equal to client.wait for job completion. And again, run ID. We can set our polling interval. So again, this will be something that you'll become more comfortable with because you know how long your DBT jobs run. So we're going to say 30 seconds because this is not a very big job, but you could set that for whatever you want it to there. And then we have it set a timeout for 600 seconds. So if I can type 600 seconds. So that's going to say basically, if this thing takes 10 minutes, let's go ahead and kill it off and we can restart. So now we're going to print our final status. So we're going to do print, do a new line in there, final job details. So again, we just want to make sure we print out all the visibility that we want here. So print an F string here, the run ID, and then do final status with the run ID. So again, grabbing that run ID from that. We can do a little bit of copying and pasting here because we're going to grab a bunch of stuff from that final status. So instead of run ID, we're going to do the actual status this time. And so final status, instead of run ID, we're going to grab the status out of there. And then we're going to do our started at and finished at times. So we'll do started at, and then obviously swap that to started at in there. And then, of course, we're going to do, if we do started at, we definitely want to do finished at. So again, same thing, swap to finished at. Perfect there. And then we're going to do a little bit of math. So if final status duration seconds. So if it gives it to us, that'd be great. So if the final status duration seconds, we're going to print that out. So F string, that is duration, final status, duration seconds, and then we'll do a colon, do a little rounding there, and say that many seconds. Perfect. So if that's the case, then we'll do print. We're going to print off the DBT version just so we know what it ran for. Again, this is probably a little bit more verbose than we need to be here. So feel free to delete any of this stuff that you don't want. But I don't know. I like to talk, as you can probably tell. So the more I print out, the better off we're going to be, right? So that works there. So now that's if things work successfully. What if it fails though? So if the final status is error. So if this is errors out, we got to also have some logging for that. So we'll do a little print, new line of error details. Throw a colon in there. And then we'll do a similar print from up here. So I'm just going to grab that and paste it in. So instead of status, we'll say the error message is final status error message. And then we'll do a print of our logs, of our error logs, so we can figure out what's going on. And then we will print out the error logs. So we'll copy and paste this in. Print. We don't really want any messages here. We just want this to directly print out the error logs. Instead of error message, we want error logs. So perfect there. And we'll throw in an elif if the final status, if it's canceled instead of errored. We also want to take note of that. So if it is canceled, we're just going to print that the job was canceled. So new line, job was canceled. So that's probably not going to happen. Error will happen. Canceled probably not going to happen unless you do it manually, but just have it in there just in case. So now we want to throw some excepts in there as well, some except blocks. So dbt run error as E, and we're going to do a logger.error, throw in an F string of dbt run failed with that error message, so E.message. Perfect there. And we'll also throw in the error message as well, so we know what's going on. So run details and E.run details there. Perfect. Okay. And a few more exceptions here as we finish up. So if we get the DBT run error, we'll do that. Except if we get a request error here, so request.exceptions.request exception as E. We'll do logger.error, and then do an F string of API request failed. Again, we're just kind of going into the nitty gritty here. These might not happen, but we just want to take care of these exceptions as we think about them. So a timeout error as E, because you never know what happens. Never know what will happen with API calls. So the more verbose you can put into your exceptions here, make your life easier in the long run. Do a timeout error there, and then last but not least, if we just have an exception, we will do a logger.error and do an unexpected error. So this is if we don't even know what happens. Print that out for us as well. Okay, that's all of our exceptions. Last but not least, it's equal to main. We are going to run this thing. So new game in dbt.serve, or we're going to serve this to Prefect and name it orchestrate new game. Need to throw some quotes around that as well. All right, so that is our Python code there. That's all we need to write for our Python code. So I'm going to save that. What we're going to do now is we're going to pop into dbt, and we're going to write the rest of the models that we need out, and then we can come back in here and actually run this thing. So then inside of Snowflake, we'll be able to see, not only will we be able to see our actual raw data that we're uploading into Snowflake, but we'll also be able to see the transform data that dbt is going to run as well. So let's hop inside of dbt and take a look at that. So I thought instead of actually writing on the SQL out kind of in person here, I've already pre-wrote it all. I'm just going to walk through what I did. All these models will be on GitHub for you if you want to copy and paste along. But I'm not doing any complicated SQL. So instead of just coding it all live, I'm just gonna walk through it here. So the things that we added in part 2 versus part 1 is we have our raw last game batting. So again, that's just selecting all from that raw table inside of Snowflake. Same thing for raw last game pitching. Same thing that's happening there. And then when we get to our intermediate models here, we're essentially just taking our team. So in that data, it gives both the Nationals and whoever they're playing that game. So we're just going to grab only our teams. Same thing inside of the pitching model here. And then we're going to bring these things together for the full season. So we have our marked season batting stats aggregated. That's selecting all this stuff and summing it up, so that's by player ID. So we're giving all those values either by an average or sum, depending on which makes sense for that particular statistic. And then and then if we do it by game, that's just keeping it by game and doing kind of some logic here to make sure that we don't have the same game going in twice. So we're unioning kind of the season stats with the last game, which is what's going on here. And the same thing's happening on the pitching side as well. So that's all the things that are happening inside of dbt. So now we're going to jump back into our code editor, and we're going to actually run this script to make all that data go into Snowflake and then make this dbt job run. So I'll see you over there. All right, so we're going to start off inside of Prefect instead of Hex. So the first thing we need to do is create a webhook for us to actually, send a request to. So I'm not going to walk through the full steps of doing this, but I do have, I just clicked this, created the webhook, named it MLB test, but this is going to be our MLB one. We have our URL here. We registered it under the service account there that we can run it. It has an expiration for the key. We don't have to worry about that right now, but there's the URL that we're going to call inside of Hex. So now let's pop inside of Hex and look and see what that code looks like. So scrolling up here to the top. So again, I'm not going to write this one out. Just I know this video is going a little bit long, so I want to make sure that I kind of get into the key points here for you. So what I did was I created a date of game here that we can send the date of the game into this piece of code and get the game ID of the game that happens on that specific day. I think that's really important so this could be reusable. So any date about the season, we can send this in, and it's going to actually grab that for us using that national schedule that we generated earlier. And then, so I'm just going to skip through that part of just grabbing that game ID from the data frame. So then down here in the second function of this Python script of send prefect webhook. So it takes the game ID, takes the webhook URL, takes in the API key. And so you can see here that we are kind of going through here. We're printing off the webhook URL that we're sending in. We're sending a payload with the game ID, so that's going to be used in the code that we wrote inside of VS Code, which is really cool. So we can grab whatever game that we wanted to grab. We have our basic headers here, sending in the JSON data, and then putting our API key in as well. So coming down here in our try block, so we're making the webhook request, printing off the URL, printing off all that stuff, just so you can see what's happening. We're going to post that request there. We're going to print the status code return. And then we're going to print that if there is no content. And then we have an if. If it's a 204, the webhook was sent successfully. If it's a 403, authentication failed. So that means that the API key is messed up, or your authentication, maybe you didn't set up an API key or something like that. That's what's going to happen there. And of course we have, anything else we're going to send request or sent successfully. Excuse me. Then we have some except blocks here, for some exceptions. So we'll just skip over those right now, but that's just if something goes bad, it's going to print those out for us. So down here in our main function, so we have our date string, webhook URL, API key, and then our schedule file. So running through here, we're going to grab the game ID using that function from the top. If we have an error, we're going to print that off. But then we're going to handle a single game here. We have it set up to do multiple games, but for a single game, we're gonna grab that game ID. We're gonna send that webhook with the game ID in it, so that we can run all of our scripts to grab all that data for us. And then obviously, if our else block is doing basically the same thing, but just if it's multiple games versus single there. So that's what that block's doing there. So down here on the bottom, we set up our URL here. That's what we saw inside of Prefect. Our API key is our API key. I have that stored as a secret inside of Hex. And then we just run that main function. And so that's what happens there. So when we send that webhook, we're going to send that into Prefect, but we haven't defined what that's going to do just yet, which is really, really important. So I'm going to pop back into Prefect. And over on the left side of your screen, you're going to be able to see that we have automations. And that's where you're going to be able to actually set things up to run. So you can see we have Moneyball Marvin here. I'm going to go into the edit since I've already pre-built this. So I have a trigger type of custom. You can see we have a bunch of options here for you to set up automations. We'll have more videos about automations coming down the pipe. Don't worry about that. And I'm saying whenever I observe any event matching this MLB single game data refresh from the following resources of MLB.GameID retrieve, we're going to make this thing run. So anytime that I observe that happening, that's going to run. Go and click next. So whenever that happens, we're going to run a deployment, and we're going to run that specific deployment, which we're going to serve off in just a moment. And then the parameters for that webhook game ID that we defined inside of the code. So I think that's really important. So let me pop that back up real quick. So inside of our function, let me lower that down real quick. So whenever we defined our function, this flow has a variable. That means that whenever we run this, we got to send a variable into Prefect for this thing to run. So if you click the run button inside the UI, it's going to ask you for that. So we're actually sending that out, and it's in the event, the payload, and the body. That's kind of how that's set up. Again, we're going to have more content showing off how to do this really, really in depth, which is why I'm not showing it off too in depth here. But so be looking out for that. Make sure you ask questions in the comments if you have them. That'll help us guide where that content goes going forward. And then, of course, this is just naming it. So this thing is set up and ready to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come down here into the terminal. Let me go ahead and stop my Prefect process that I had running. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to run that script. That's going to tell us that has been served and it is ready for scheduled runs. That's good to go there. So now I can go back into my browser, go back into Hex. I can run that. So if I run that, you can see it's going to give us the request details and then everything that was sent out. So this, successfully sent the webhook for that specific game ID. I can now pop back into Prefect, go to runs. You can see this thing is this runs pending. I can click on that. It's going to open up here, and we're going to see this thing as it's actually running. So you can see that it's currently uploading the CSV and the Snowflake, both of those files, the batting and the pitching. So that's ran there. We can wait for our job completion, or it's triggered the DBT job now. And so now we're waiting for that job to complete, as we can see here. So remember, DBT has an API that triggers the run, and then it has one that you check the status. So we're kind of waiting for this thing to finish as it currently sits. And so whenever that is done, so this is going to keep polling every 30 seconds until we either get a success or a failure for a final run there. There we go. So now it's green. So that means that the job has finished. And in just a second, it's going to print off the status. So you can see the final job details. So that was DBT job run ID. This one, the status is successful. It started at that time. So our Prefect flow run has completed, and then it has now exited cleanly. So this thing finished running successfully. So now we've actually uploaded the game data into Snowflake, and we've run a DBT run to actually merge that new game data into our actual full season data. So now we're going to pop back into Hex, and we're going to use Hex to kind of dashboard the full season data and take a look and see what happened in this national season. All right, so jumping inside of Hex here, we're just going to take a look and see at the data that we pulled in, make sure everything looks right. I'm not an expert on dashboarding, so if you are an expert on dashboarding, I'm sure you won't be impressed by what I built here, but I just want to take a look and make sure that we got the data that we want to see. So inside of Hex, I'm going to click Data. So you can see we have our March season batting stats aggregated. So this is when we pulled in all the batting stats and aggregated them for the full season. So you can see we have player ID, games played, most recent team, which would be the Nationals, all the way down. And we have total at bats, total hits, runs, doubles, triples, so on and so forth here. So everything looks pretty good here. We can continue scrolling across. There's our average, OPS, on base percentage, slugging, so on and so forth there. So everything looks okay there. We can go by game if we want to as well. So this will load up. So this is the same data except it's by game. So not aggregated here. So you can see the data is going to be obviously much smaller since it's per game versus overall, which means we get some cool looking averages as well. So like no one's batting 571 for the season. If they are, then they probably are the best player in the league. But yeah, so that's our batting stats. And then for pitching stats here, we want to go ahead and aggregate those. So aggregated. So again, same kind of idea here. So total wins, losses, saves. So you can see this is probably the closer for the Nationals here. So of course we would connect our player ID to our roster file, and then combine those together. So I used to work in Power BI with some star schema. So that's kind of how I set this thing up. So that's what it looks like there. So total saves, we have total innings, pitches, total hits, runs, earned runs, so on and so forth there. So everything looks good on the pitching side as well. And then, of course, we can go to by game as well. So, again, we have our is win, is loss, is saves. That's what we use to aggregate wins, losses, and saves there. Innings pitched, ERA, number of pitches. So some cool data that we get here inside the pitching stats as well. If we want to look at these as a chart, we can actually go and add to project as a chart cell. And then we can choose our chart type. We'll do a grouped column. We'll do in the x-axis, we will do the player ID. Y-axis, maybe we'll do, not by game, let's go back and do the aggregated one. So do aggregated, use this table instead. So player ID, and then we'll do maybe total innings pitched to see how many innings that were pitched by the players there. So you can see that doesn't look great because it's taking the player ID as a number, so it's doing some weird stuff there. If I change that to take it as a string instead as that, now our chart looks pretty good. So we can see player 663, 623 has the most innings pitched this season for the Nationals, and then going down to 571, 578, and then going over to over to this one, 669, 022, which of course we can. We can change some things up there and make it, we can color it by different things and whatnot there. But again, this isn't really a dashboarding video. I just wanted to show off that when we did get data came in, we did aggregate all that data inside of DBT for the full season, which I think is really cool. So yeah, we went through a full project of grabbing the data using Python for extraction. So in both parts, we did the full season in part 1. The final game in part 2, we did an event-based workflow here in part 2 of actually sending in that final game data based on that last game finishing, which again would be really cool. We'll have some more cool things coming out from Moneyball Marvin once the season starts here for the Nationals. We'll add in some cool things. We have a cool idea for a Twitter project that I think will be really neat as well. So if you're still with us at this point in the video, we really appreciate it. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel to see more content we have coming out later. And until then, I'll see you next time.